And let's bring in our friend Darren Gant, Panthers.com. Oh, I see what's behind you, Darren.
I know that that's for you. Otherwise, I would be a slightly offended. And no offense to Armonte Edwards, he was a lovely person, I'm sure. It's more what Armonte represents to me, than like having anything against him. I know that's for you, so I won't take offense.
App State grad Darren Gant repping Armonte Edwards jersey behind him on the YouTube channel. Darren, what's going on, man?
There's like a multi-layered story behind this jersey today. I was asked by a friend elsewhere in the organization yesterday. They seemed a little frustrated. They had a last-minute ask put on them, and they said, "We've got to decorate Luke Combs's green room for the weekend." He wanted some memorabilia. He wanted something so he would feel at home here in Bank of America Stadium for his 2 weekend shows. And I said, "Brother, I have just the item for you." And so this came out of the personal collection. I found a few of these hidden in a closet once upon a time that weren't going to good use. So I have rescued them, and I've given them out to some friends. They're all finding good homes.
This is all perfect timing because I know Scott Fowler at the Charlotte Observer just released his feature. He's doing this series, Sports Legends of the Carolinas.
Yeah,
and Armonte Edwards.
And there you go. He is.
Yeah.
What he did, the Michigan, all that, the upset, yes.
But he referred 100%. To his time with the Panthers as the dark times, Darren.
Yeah.
I feel for Armonte in that way.
I do too, and not to sidetrack your entire podcast, but Armonte Edwards.
Podcast is for Darren.
Fair enough. What's the clock say? When do you got to be out for the next break? It's like writing for the internet. We've got all day to do this.
Yeah, man, we're good. We're good.
Armonte Edwards he suffered from the time he entered the NFL, and he rolled into Carolina during the year one of the John Fox mutiny. And when they had all these rookies that nobody wanted, and he rolled up on the lockout and never had an off season to train, to get stronger. One of the things, he was obviously undersized coming out of college.
Yeah.
To make him an NFL wide receiver, they wanted to put 15 pounds on him. And he never really had that opportunity because of the lockout to be able to take part in a full off-season program. You roll into training camp. He's with a coach who didn't really want him or any of these other guys. And it just kind of went downhill from there.
So are you telling me that Armonte Edwards will not be in the Hall of Honor for the Carolina Panthers?
He's in my Hall of Honor.
Okay, your personal Hall of Honor.
Is he in one? I feel like he should be.
He should be.
Yeah, whatever it is, if we've got one of those in Boone, he should definitely already be in it. If he's not, and he might be, and I just don't know, that's entirely possible also.
Yeah, that's entirely possible.
Put him in if he's not.
All right, so let's brought you on today to kind of talk about a few things related to nostalgia and the Carolina Panthers. And they just announced, and that's why I wanted to, because you are King Nostalgia. So is Brownlow to a certain extent.
Yes.
I feel like, so did they really go? How many years did they go without a Hall of Honor? It was like 20 years without a Hall of Honor?
Yeah, something like that. It kind of fell in the back burner for a while during the end of the Richardson administration.
Yeah.
I think there was, and I know from him telling me this, there was a genuine desire not to water it down in the early years, not to get too excited, which actually is probably wise when you're 5 years old. You don't want to induct 10 people because then what happens when you actually do something? So I think it was probably a conscious decision. But one of the things Dave Tepper did when he bought the team is he wanted to do a little bit of that outreach and create some of those ties for some of the old guys. And going with a 4-man class in 2019 was a little bit of a catch up. I don't know that you'll necessarily see big, gigantic 4-man classes in the future or every year or every other year even. I don't know what Dave and I have talked about many things, but not necessarily that as far as what his plans are. But I think it's good. I think it gives fans an opportunity to tap into the things that make them feel good about this franchise. You saw it a year ago with Sam Mills going into the Hall of Fame. And, it's almost like it was close to being forgotten. It was so long ago. And then when you bring it back, you realize, oh, wow, hey, the customers really dig on this stuff.
Yeah, they do. And I to your point, you don't want to start this thing when the organization is fresh. You know, the Carolina Hurricanes just recently did this as a part of their 25th anniversary. It was the right time.
That's a good time
to start doing a Canes Hall of Fame. They automatically inducted Rod Brindamore, Ron Francis, Glenn Wesley, because their numbers are already honored. And then they did the right thing, the sensible thing of putting Cam Ward in the first class. And I think they're going to do like one a year going forward. So I feel like there was a little bit of catch up, to your point, with the Carolina Panthers, and all these names so far make sense. And it's I feel like, to your point about the customers, and maybe I'm reading this wrong because I'm kind of a late arrival when it comes to Carolina Panthers fandom, in that the Panthers don't necessarily have a robust NFL history. They've got their Super Bowl appearances, they've got those lean years, but they certainly have fan favorites.
Yes, 100%.
And these guys, Julius Peppers and Muhsin Muhammad, make total sense to put in the class, right?
Yes, 100%. Like, I was so happy to see Muhsin Muhammad on there, because I do think, and don't get me wrong, as you know, Darren, I love Steve Smith more than almost any other person. However, Moose was great. And I think he kind of, because he didn't have that huge personality like Smitty did, he kind of tended to get forgotten, especially as time went by, which I thought was unfair, because he was great. He was
he did have a personality of his own. He was still a wide receiver, and he was rather fond of his own accomplishments. I was standing there the day he walked on the practice field after taping over the nameplate on his jersey and wrote "decoy" on the back with a Sharpie. So,
oh, that's right. I forget.
Yeah. So let's not undersell Moose's personality, but that's such a neat kind of subplot to this whole thing. And we're going to get into this more at Panthers.com in the coming days. But that whole relationship between him and Steve, there was absolutely some dynamic tension between the two of them, because you had two alphas, as the kids say, two guys trying to be the lead dog, and there were two of them here at the same time. So there was a little bit of a push-pull, and now they get along. Now they're close friends, but it wasn't always necessarily that case. And it took some time for those two to kind of grow into that place.
About the complicated relationships that players have with their own teammates or even with their own organizations, I feel like that's the case with Julius Peppers as well. This was the Julius Peppers time was when you were really in the thick of being a beat writer for the Carolina Panthers. And I always go back to a conversation we must have had back in the 850 The Buzz days, way back in the day.
The Rock Hill Herald days.
Yes, where, again, correct me if I'm wrong.
Jobs ago. Sorry.
So many jobs ago. But I feel like, if I remember this conversation correctly, Peppers, with all the talent, was not exactly the vocal leader that the Panthers might have needed at that time. But again, time heals these things. There's his return, and we saw a different Peppers when he was back with the Panthers, right?
Yeah, he did. He kind of came back, and he and I talked about this. And again, shameless tease, we'll have more from Julius coming up on Panthers.com soon. You'll want to check that out.
All right.
Julius was kind of finding himself as a human being as much as a football player. I mean, you talk about a kid who grew up in a small town in eastern North Carolina, played at the University of North Carolina, is drafted second overall by the Carolina Panthers. He had never been out of his home state. He had never really stretched himself out and been able to grow as a person. And I say this, I raise my hand in self-awareness as a person who grew up in suburban Hickory and went to Appalachian State and has worked in Charlotte media his entire life. There's something about home. Julius kind of wanted to experience something outside of the thing he had always known. And there was a fishbowl quality to it that he was never completely comfortable with. But he did. When he came back from Green Bay, he was a different guy. I mean, he was a little bit bigger. You know, he was pushing 300 pounds anyway. But he comes back bigger, but he had a presence about him. I mean, Julius comes back in the door almost as this warrior, poet, statesman who was leading all these young people who didn't know the thing. So I think it's a really neat personal progression for him, because he was at peace with coming back, and he considered coming back even sooner than he actually did, and it didn't quite work out. But he feels a little more comfortable in his own skin now, I think, just from talking to him about it. But he acknowledged that, you know, yes, personal. That one was more about personal growth than money or football or any of that kind of stuff.
And Julius just made everything look so easy on the football field. And there was always, no matter how many sacks he managed to get or whatever, no matter what his performance was, it was like people always wanted more out of him from a performance. And that was always so fascinating to me because he just made it look easy. And it always was like I remember people would accuse him of not trying hard enough. That always got frustrating for me because I'm like, come on. But, and he had to deal with all of that. He had to deal with sort of being this like the great expectations put on him, both at North Carolina and then when he went to it was just a lot for him to deal with. I was happy to have him back when he came back. I mean,
when you are the size of Reggie White and can run like Steve Smith, I mean, these things aren't normal. So
I don't think there's an athlete I've seen like in person that's better than him. Like just all around athlete. I don't think so. I mean, he was a great basketball player too. Like really good.
An incredible basketball player. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm convinced, I am firm in the belief. I remember talking to Chris Blake of the NBA when Julius was playing basketball at Carolina. And I said, if he concentrated on basketball, and he was like, oh, yeah, he's a first round pick. I mean, he's probably Ben Wallace if he gets to the league and plays 10 years. I mean, at least Ben Wallace. And because as you saw him develop in football and become more than just a physical freak, he would have probably done the same thing in basketball. He's just different. I mean, that's all there is to it.
He's just like, he is different. I've never seen anybody like him. I doubt I ever will again.
All right. So Darren Gant from Panthers.com joining us on the Heiser Automotive Group hotline. So who's next? Is it too soon to put Cam Newton in?
No. Sorry.
Well, now I will say, and I hope I'm not speaking out of school here, but I do. One of the things that you want your Hall of Honor honorees to be is retired for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's fair.
And Cameron Jarrell Newton has yet to come around to the idea that his playing career might be drawing nigh, and he's still out there talking about opportunities. And, I mean, are there guys worse than him currently playing NFL football? There absolutely are. The thing I worry about with Cam is we've reached that point of diminishing returns physically with him. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, ultimately, when his race is run, we will look back at the shoulder injury that really kind of started in the 17 season. The TJ Watt hit in Pittsburgh in 18 on Thursday Night Football is the thing everybody remembers. Yep. That was kind of the last straw. You can draw a line between career prior to that game and after that game. Yes. And he's just never the same afterward. And Cam was still a special player with his legs, as you saw when he rolled back in here in 21. For a brief moment, that 10-day span when things were fun in 2021.
It was like the last fun I remember.
That was the last amount of fun for the Carolina Panthers up until now. And this all.
Well, I mean, there was the run last year when they were pushing for the playoffs ? And running 50 times a game. It was old school fun, but some people.
Here's what I'm going to tell you.
Brownlow didn't enjoy that,
and I'm also going to tell you where it wasn't from our perspective. And I'm not trying to put you in a compromised position here, but while the Panthers were winning, there was an outside conversation about whether people actually wanted them to win because of Wilkes as a head coach potential. No, you got to tank for the best pick in the draft. All these other things.
The only fun thing about it for me was the Steve Wilkes aspect of it all. That was the only thing
it was good to see him win, but again,
then it was like, hey, can we get a good draft pick, please?
When you're doing daily radio during the football season, when that was going on, it wasn't all that fun.
Yeah,
they were offering up manna. They were offering up cheap content. You could do the tanking versus making the playoffs every day.
I know that can be exhausting after a while. And I think
you guys were looking at gift horses in the mouth.
No, but here's where I'm at on this, and this is where we'll kind of close the conversation. I think, and Brownlow's a perfect person to have in here for this conversation. After a while, that kind of stuff starts to break fandom and apathy sets in. And you just kind of check out. And I think what the Carolina Panthers have done a good job of, and you are obviously a part of this, Darren, that it's trying to make people feel good about the team again.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's not just in the nostalgic warm fuzzies of Frank Reich or whatever it is. I think the way that the blueprint, the social media stuff, the YouTube show, Bryce Young, and kind of the charm offensive that's been taking place since they've drafted him is trying to get people to feel good about the team again. And optimism is
reason for hope. Right.
Optimism is ultimately what fuels your fandom. And I think it's going to be a fun year, Bank of America.
Yeah, and I think, and I can tell you this in all honesty, we're friends. This is not a coordinated effort on my part. This is organic. I mean, guys like Luke Kuechly, guys like Jake Delhomme, guys like Thomas Davis come to practice and are welcomed.
Yeah.
And they feel like they're
having a moment here. In my feelings.
Yeah. And I mean, so Luke Kuechly, honest to God, is here often enough. When he walks in, it's like, oh yeah, Luke's here. And then you kind of have to stop and realize, gang, that's Luke Kuechly over there. He's one of those guys. He's one of those guys we'll talk about in this context in the future.
Yes.
Of a Hall of Honor. And there are plenty of guys like that. We could talk about Greg Olson.
I was going to bring him up. Yeah.
Luke Kuechly, Ryan Khalil, Thomas Davis.
Oh yeah. Thomas Davis got to be on there considering what he did to his arm to play in the Super Bowl.
And of course, that one guy, that one guy, one of these days.
Yes, one of these days for sure.
One of these days. Darren Gant, Panthers.com. Hey man, appreciate it. Good catching up. We'll have highlights.
This is fun. See you soon.
Yeah, we'll be in Charlotte soon enough. Soon enough. All right, man. We'll talk to you later.
See y'all.